Hi guys, right, this is episode 15 review of Battlebots. No, it's not. It's full of shit. It's episode 14. Episode 14 of Battlebots. So this is technically part of the pre-season, but I don't think it is. It's basically just extended the tournament because it's now a knockout. The win and you're in format. But I think that really raised the stakes, and I quite like that for this episode, even though some of my favourites did not make it through. But that just added to the drama for me. So first fight was Valkyrie against Quantum. Obviously I wanted Quantum to win here just because it's the UK robot and it's like sort of the classic Razor but updated to be competitive nowadays. And I was really glad that it won. Very, very careful driving from them, waiting their moment. And when the tooth got ripped off, I kind of forgot about the fact that I've only seen the first season of King of Bots, but the tooth got ripped off quite a few times. And once that's off, they're no longer a crusher, but they're an incredibly good control bot. It's almost like it doesn't matter, they just change their type of attack and then just go with that. So they sort of went in a bit more confidently after that, and yeah, just dominated the fight, fed them to the screws, etc. So yeah, I'm really glad they're through. It's really good to have a different weapon type, you know. It's a tendency for a lot of just vertical spinners to get through to the final, so I'm glad we've got something completely different in there. Next fight was Yeti versus Duck. As they say, the Duck doesn't do very well in judge decisions because it's quite a defensive robot. They kind of had Yeti at first, they got him over and Yeti really struggled to get back upright. But once they were upright, they then just sort of dominated. Duck's kind of flipper scoop this year, it just doesn't work for me. I think it does need some refinement because it just seems to bounce them all over the place and make it kind of uncontrollable. But yeah, Yeti doing some incredible driving because again, Duck is a very well driven robot, but Yeti getting around the side, getting some rear attacks, etc. So yeah, and again, good to see Yeti getting quite far as well. I like their style of just enormous drum on the front. I think that's good. Next fight was Lockjaw against Scorpius. So each robot has its like skills and stuff. With Lockjaw, it's driving. The driving was just phenomenal in this. It did help, obviously, that it had the lower ground clearance with those forks. You know, you're going to struggle if you can't get underneath. But it was still just on point. It didn't put a foot wrong. Just incredible driving. But to be fair to Scorpius, they stood up really well, and even when they were absolutely on the back foot, they were still trying to attack with that overhead weapon. Next fight was Hypershock against Huge. At the start of this fight, by the way, you can just see me there in the crowd chanting away, even though by this point I was back in England. The fun of editing. I really liked it in this fight. Will Bells was happy just to put on rakes and go and just have silliness still. Like, even though this is a knockout fight, literally if he doesn't win this, he's out of the competition, and yet he's still taping rakes to the top of his robot and stuff. I think that's fantastic and a really good attitude to have. And it's a shame because it started off, they actually worked quite well, but then it backfired and the rake got stuck behind his weapon, so he was kind of weaponless. But to be fair, even without that, I've never seen such good driving against Huge. Like, it's so hard to get hold of, but he was doing a really good job of like pushing Huge around into the screws, etc. Huge though, again, like those devastating hits, and it's definitely one of the more unorthodox designs, but it works so well. And now that it doesn't seem to be falling apart anymore, falling in two, it's intriguing to see how far they will go, just because not many people have an answer to it. Next up was a freeway battle between Railgun Max, Bloodsport and Uppercut. Personally, I'm not really a big fan of freeway fights. So this one started off okay, like they were all attacking each other, but then it got to sort of a stalemate point. All three of them had weapons spun up, and they all kind of just looked at each other, and then someone just had to go in for the attack. So Railgun Max went for Bloodsport. Bloodsport gets sent flying out, similar to the wedges that they always fly out, which I think is great fun, kind of poetic. But in doing so, Railgun Max is kind of knackered. And then, obviously, Uppercut just needs to come in and just finish it off. And that's not saying anything against Uppercut. It's had a really good season, a really good debut, beat Scorpius, you know, blimey, it's done incredibly well. But at the same time, in this battle, or any freeway, I think the one who kind of hangs back, it doesn't encourage them to actually attack, but they'll probably win if they don't, if you see what I mean. Well done for them getting into top 16, like, you know, a huge achievement anyway. But that's just my kind of little mini rant on freeway fights there. Next up was Rotator against Blacksmith. This was a real surprise. So Rotator pretty early on took out Blacksmith's weapon. They didn't get a single hit with that axe hammer. And yet the decision went with Blacksmith because they were so dominant, I guess, and just very controlling. which I think is good. I think, to be honest, I think, is it Robo games where they have the only criteria is dominance, or domination. That's their only judgment criteria, and I quite like that. I think that's kind of the better way to judge these battles, but that's not how it is in Battlebots, and yet this one kind of looked like that's how they were judging it. And yeah, you could see the visible shock on Al Kindle's face, just like absolutely over the moon, couldn't believe it. So yeah, really an interesting one, definitely. But again, good to have a different kind of weapon type in the top 16. Real shame for Rotator because they've had a very good season. You know, beating Tombstone, that's like a legendary match. But they shouldn't be disappointed just because, yeah, they could have gone home after that and been winners in my book. Next up was Cobhead against Son of Waiachi. So this was like a little bit of a rematch because Poison Arrow beat Son of Waiachi, flicked it miles up in the air before. And this match was way longer than I thought it would be. You know, Son of Waiachi tends not to have very long matches. Both of them actually got some good hits. Again, Son of Waiachi was sent throwing, you know, flying up in the air at one point. So amazing that they've done that twice against the same, you know, very powerful robot in Son of Waiachi. But ultimately, the insane physics of Son of Waiachi just win through. They've had a very good season this year, and again, it'd be interesting to see who beats them if they do get beaten. And the main event fight of this episode was Minotaur against Cobalt. And I was so upset, I was so cut off. How could I choose between my original ultimate favourite Minotaur and like my good UK favourite in Cobalt? Yeah, very tricky. So I decided I was just going to watch what happened, enjoy it, and then support whoever won. Yeah, this was good. This was a very good fight. Again, quite back and forth. Cobalt losing that wedge straight away, which obviously puts them at a disadvantage. I'm almost 100% they will have improved that by next season if they come back. The height achieved from that hit. So that was actually, I heard more information about this afterwards. So that was a combination of Minotaur pinging Cobalt up, but also Cobalt hitting the kind of like I-beam kind of spiky girders at the side of the arena and throwing themselves up. So it was like a combination of the two spinners, which is why it got such psychotic height and seemed to be up in the air for ages. And none of the cameramen seemed like were even prepared for that, which is fair enough. Obviously Minotaur lost the weapon part of the way through, but again proved that they can just push stuff around and just, yeah, really go for it. So yeah, Minotaur the victor. Which, like I say, I didn't know who I wanted to win, so Minotaur the victor is good enough for me. And imagine if they, after having such an awful start to the season, imagine if they bring it back and win. That would just be the coolest thing and like the coolest story. So yeah, I'm behind Minotaur still. Right, so thank you so much for watching this, guys. By the time I've edited these, I don't think I will be up to date. I think I'll be an episode behind again. But I don't care. For today, I'm doing very well. Thanks a lot for watching, and cheerio. Next was a freeway battle between Railgun Max, Bloodsport, and Piss Flaps. Next up was a freeway battle between Railgun Max, Uppercut, and for fuck's sake, I now just want to say Piss Flaps.